Ora, boa tarde a todos. Obrigado por terem vindo aqui a este evento sobre transformação digital. Antes de mais, gostaria de agradecer à organização ao ECAS por ter organizado este evento e à Câmara Municipal de Lisboa por o apoiar e nos ceder o espaço e ajudar aqui. Este evento será um evento em inglês, portanto está a ser organizado pelos nossos parceiros ECAS de Bruxelas e que irão gerir aqui toda a sessão. Eu vou fazer uma pequena introdução e depois irei passar a palavra para fazermos todo o trabalho de co-construção de ideias relativamente à transformação digital. Portanto, foi-vos entregue na entrada o programa, portanto, a agenda desta discussão, e o objetivo será trabalhar aqui os conceitos. Infelizmente, ainda há algumas pessoas que estão atrasadas e ainda não chegaram, mas temos que iniciar o evento. So, let's switch to English. So, first of all, thank you to everyone for attending. I'll be doing a brief introduction to the theme of digital transformation, and then I will pass to my colleague who will follow up with all the event activities. Okay, so digital transformation. So since the beginning that we have been trying in Portugal and worldwide to move as much as possible to digital. So we have been seeing many organizations, government organizations, and many others to stop paper, stop in-person interactions, and move everything to online, to digital. So what we want to discuss here and to see is also not only the advantages of this, but also what we are losing. And as I say here, so in person, we saw that during COVID, this was extended and magnified by a lot during these last years. And the questions, and for me, the main concerns are what has happened and did we do it properly, and what could be the impact of these changes. Before COVID, we were trying to do this slowly with also because the lack of resources, some inability from many of the users and clients of the organizations. And we have been moving gradually to this, but in the last years, this has exploded a lot. So this is why, and while preparing this presentation, I saw this nice figure that tries to map a lot of the technologies around digital transformation. And still knowing the processes that we are involved in Portugal, but I would believe it's across Europe and even worldwide, we see that, at least in my opinion, is that we have two perspectives. The ones that embrace technology and the ones that don't. And everything that I see here is very nice for a startup that is working on this. This is how they get venture capital and how they evolve in their business. But my main question is, who is going to use this? And if we are excluding certain type of individuals from this new era of digital transformation. And I've been working with many of the organizations that I see here, and for more than 5-6 years, one of my concerns is who are we excluding from this? So it's not that with these digital tools we cannot reach other citizens or other clients that we couldn't in another way, but I'm more concerned about who are we excluding. And with some of you, I've done several tests and experiments to see how can technology also embrace people with disabilities, info excluded, and socioeconomic neighborhoods and families that do not have access to some of the technologies that we are now trying to push. Some examples of these is with the processes of participation, with simple things like scheduling a medical appointment or many other activities. Even e-commerce is something that is challenging for most people, or for a big group of persons in our cities and in our communities. So my question is, for whom is this technology, and what is the cost of this change? Also, in the other perspective, we have, okay, Amazon is great. It's so easy to buy something. But what is the cost of doing this? Our neighborhood stores, are they impacted by this or not? And this is something, as a company who develops and brings these new technologies to our communities. This is something that sometimes we need to think about and take care of it. And then we have the simple example of our mail. So a couple of years ago, no one was writing letters. Now no one writes letters. Everyone is talking in WhatsApp and things like that. And our mailing system was in a big trouble. But now we see that e-commerce is bad for some stores, but for example, the distribution of deliveries is blowing. So we never saw as many delivery companies and staff working in that like we see today. So how can we properly assess how digital transformation impacts our society? That's something that I don't have an answer, and I for sure we will discuss this a little bit more. And to conclude, this is always something related to pros and cons and how we can do this. And as I said before, the channels. So you here have kind of an evolution of the different channels that we have seen in our society in the last 20 years, probably. So first, we always had a store. Everyone goes to a store and nothing more. Then we have a store. We have our phones. We have our computer to do our interactions. This was the multi-channel. But then this starts mixing. So now we do part of. We can do stuff in our mobile phone, and it's exactly the same as doing it in our computer or going to the store. And you see that the current understanding of these channels, and this is something that I'm a little bit worried, is that we now don't even know what we are doing. So it's kind of omni-channel. So it's a mix of everything everywhere. So and for sure, all of us have noticed that we get a notification in the phone and one in the tablet, and then if we go to the computer, we are again bombarded with notifications. And what's happening here? And my question for this is exactly what drives this. And the key thing, or the key question I leave here is this something that we are asking for? Is this something that we need? Or is this something that only happens because it's a business model? It's because business is using this to drive more business? Or are we thinking about the society to bring more value to what we can do? And I don't know the answer to this, or I have my opinions, but I hope that some of these issues are the ones that we are going to approach here. And I know that at least most of you in here have already thought about these concerns and all of these aspects. So now we have here our agenda. As you can see from the agenda we have shared with you all, we have quite a compact session for 2 hours for discussion, but for sure it will be quite interesting. So I stop my intervention now, and I'll leave it to you.
So I would like to welcome you everyone in today's event. Luis touched upon critical matters, and indeed designing now the digital transformation from a citizen-centric perspective is vital. So today we have prepared an interactive training, making sure that there is a fine balance between us sharing our knowledge on digital transformation on the EU level and you sharing your perspectives on what policies would ensure inclusion in digital policies. You have a very good understanding of the local perspective and of the local needs, so that's what we are here to exchange and to learn from you. So before we dive into the training, I would like to share a few things on what ECAS has been doing during the last years. So ECAS is part of a network of more than 90 organizations all over Europe called the Civil Society Convention on the Conference of the Future of Europe. The convention is structured around 5 thematic clusters and actively engages in scrutinizing the democratic functioning of the Conference on the Future of Europe and ensuring genuine involvement of citizens and representative associations in this process. Under this context, ECAS has been leading the digital transformation cluster, which aims at bringing proposals that will feed into the EU's priority of a Europe fit for the digital age. This priority aims at strengthening the EU's digital sovereignty and setting standards on data technology and infrastructure with a clear focus on ethics, education, fundamental rights, and European values. So to achieve that, the cluster, which ECAS has been leading, operated an intense crowdsourcing process, receiving recommendations from civil society organizations across Europe on how to ensure inclusive policies on 5 broad digital transformation categories: digital democracy, digital economy, digital education, digital safeguards, and digital rights. You may recognize these 5 categories from the agenda. We have structured the co-creation sessions exactly based on these focus areas. And how the co-creation process will take place. For each category, we will have a co-creation activity, but before this activity, my colleague Elisa, who is the program director of ECAS on European democracy and is leading the cluster of digital transformation of the convention, will share a few information. She will do an info session on the main challenges, the main developments of its category, and she will also present some exemplary recommendations so that you can get as much context as possible, so that you can then contribute about the Portuguese experience and about what measures EU should impose in order to ensure inclusive digital policies. As you see in the current slide, we will touch upon the possibilities and risks that transitioning to e-government and e-voting entails, the skill gap that the institutions will need to take into consideration, implications on privacy and citizens' rights, business and economy, and of course we will touch upon safeguards issues relating to hate speech and online disinformation, among others. The exemplary recommendations that we will also have derived implemented in 4 different phases. So first we had the idea collection, then the idea selection through voting on the existing ideas we had selected in the previous phase. Then we had the policy formulation, and finally resolution and adoption. Through this process, we managed to gather 216 ideas and recommendations from about 1,200 CSOs across Europe. The organizations you see here are only some of the ones that are part of the working group of the cluster. Since ensuring inclusion in the digital transformation policies of Europe is of strategic significance to the EU priorities, we have taken up the challenge of seeking advice from as many possible stakeholders in a variety of local contexts. Your contribution and the contribution of others will ensure that the policies that will be developed will fit the experience of the Portuguese people and especially of the vulnerable groups of the. Now, to make sure that we can do this with no obstacles, I would kindly ask you to join our Slido session either through this QR code or through joining slido.com and putting the unique number hashtag 736065, or in the comments, Luis, can we share the link? So please put inclusion with no gap after it. So it's inclusion with no gap. The passcode is inclusion with no gap. And you will, when you join, you will see the Q&A. So feel free to ask any question you want in the Q&A through Slido. And of course, you will have the ability to respond to our questions. This is a short icebreaker for us to see your familiarity with the topic of digital transformation. Okay, so we have 10 responses, and we have half being having some, over half having some basic knowledge, some having some solid background, and some saying that they are an expert. Okay, so now I think it's time that we move on to the first co-creation session with Elisa. So Elisa, the floor is yours. Elisa, like I said, is our program director and leader of the digital transformation cluster. So Elisa, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay, that's good. So hi, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. As my colleague mentioned, I am Elisa, and I've been leading the digital transformation cluster in the past year. And now, as you probably know, the conference on the future of Europe is over. but our work does not stop here, and we will be trying to advocate these digital transformation recommendations at the institutional level, but also amongst civil society organizations. And this is why we are organizing this event today, because we would like also local stakeholders like yourself to know more about what happened at the EU level, so that you can also contribute to how to make digital transformation more inclusive in Europe. So as Vasiliki was mentioning, these recommendations that you will see now were a combination of recommendations together from civil society actors. So we have been working the whole year to come up with these recommendations, and we brought them actually to the working group of the Conference of the Future of Europe. And if you're interested in the recommendations, please let me know. I can send you the right link where you can see what the Conference on the Future of Europe came up with, which was a collaboration between citizens and also EU policymakers and civil society. So today, as Vasiliki was saying, we will do 5 different subtopics. The first one is this one, digital democracy. So what do we mean by digital democracy? It's basically the use of ICT in political and governance processes. And when we talk about digital democracy, what we did in our group was that we divided it into mainly 3 aspects, with a 4th one, as you can see. And the first aspect is around e-government. And e-government is really the use of technology to enhance public administration of public services. In the second aspect of digital democracy is around e-transparency, so mainly the use of technology to make information more transparent so that citizens can understand it and also be a part of democracy, of course. In the third aspect, there is a real, let's say, interaction between the government and the citizens, and it is really the use of technology on behalf of these 2 actors in order to have a say, especially for citizens to have a say in policy making and in decision-making processes. So here we talk about civic tech, obviously, and everything that is crowdsourcing, participatory budgeting, online consultation processes, etc. And the 4th one is actually part of e-participation, but we took it aside because there has been a lot of discussion around e-voting and e-elections also at the EU level. So we wanted to keep this category a bit open. And it is, of course, the use of technology to allow voters to record a secret ballot and to cast their votes electronically. So what we came out with in the report that we can actually send to you after this event is that what we saw was that there were certain challenges with e-democracy. And these challenges you will see throughout the 5 different topics are almost always the same. It's about ensuring accessibility, ensuring inclusiveness, and ensuring transparency in this case. So just a disclaimer, the civil society organizations that came up with these recommendations were not all of them working around technologies, but we had organizations such as the European Disability Forum, we had organizations defending rights of seniors, we had organizations around civic education, etc. So what we would like from you today is also your valuable knowledge that doesn't have to be absolutely tech savvy, but absolutely anything that you work on and how the digital has an effect on that is important. So as you can see, when we talk about digital democracy, there were certain proposed actions. For example, make internet, free, equal, affordable internet, a fundamental right for every EU citizen. This is based on the model in Finland, where actually in Finland, it is a fundamental right for citizens to have fast internet and high-speed Wi-Fi. So this was an interesting example of what we came up with, that every EU citizen should have access to the internet as a fundamental right. Another aspect that you will see quite often is really about how civil society organizations can help this transition into the digital world. mainly if there were to be more funding and for civil society organizations to actually support people who are excluded from the digital transition. This could work. Civil society can really play a role in supporting and guiding citizens into the digital transition. Another debate that we had was really around open source. And so some civil societies feel very strongly about the fact that public sector e-governance solutions should be made under free and open source software license. And then we talked about more e-participation, and we think as civil society that there should be more testing and combination of new methods of citizen engagement at the EU level. If you know about the EU level, you know that there are very few ways for an EU citizens to participate in EU policymaking. So we would love to see a pilot, for example, of participatory budgeting at the EU level, or even of crowdsourcing legislation. And fifth, piloting e-voting at the next European elections, provided obviously that this e-voting technology is technically secure, efficient, and can guarantee transparency in the process. So these are some of the recommendations and proposed actions for the EU level. So now we will start the co-creation session that you will see basically on your Slido. It is up to you to answer in the most honest way how you feel about what is happening in your country, in your city, and how we can make digital much more inclusive and make sure that no one is left behind. So we can start the co-creation session now. And as Vasiliki will tell you, we will leave you around 10 minutes to fill in the Slido. And of course, if you're in the room, you can also discuss with the people around you. And we'll just leave you 10 minutes to go through the questions and to answer to all of these Slido questions. As very generic questions, they're very easy questions and really, really based on your experience. So Vasiliki, I'll pass you back the floor if you want to say a bit more.
Thank you, Lisa. So let's start with the first question. Do you regularly use online e-government public services in Portugal? You can again log in with the same link that is shared through Zoom, or you can use the QR code, or go to slido.com and use the hashtag 76065 as the unique number. Okay, we already have 2 submissions. Just be aware that you need to press submit at the end of the questionnaire. So this is a questionnaire with several questions. As you can see, we have the next question is, do you prefer public administration services to be online or offline? Feel free to discuss among you. I mean, of course, it would be great to be able to be all in the same room and discuss about this, but there's recommendations that do not have to be like only what you think, but if you have questions, you can exchange ideas with one another. Then we have the question, do you find it easy to access online governmental information, public services, legislation, procedures, policy-making processes, info on MPs, etc. So we already have 5 responses, and there is a balance between yes, no, sometimes. I am very interested to see how this ends up. Do you find it easy to access online information of the EU institutions? So this does not have to do with your local public administration, the government and European level, but still it is very important to know the local experience and how this translates to your needs. Then we have do you ever use an e-participation tool to voice your ideas or engage in policy making? And we have like 10 responses with 80% no. which I think testifies to the job that we have to do in the future. Would you be comfortable in voting online at the next European elections? We have an 89% of for yes. So this shows a positive tendency towards voting online, e-voting. I think, Elisa, this at least speaks of the willingness of citizens. And then we have some open questions. What do you think the main challenge of accessing e-government services online? So we have lack of digital skills. We will also discuss about the skill gap on the field of digital education. Some documentation isn't always clear or easily available to the public. Everyone should be able to learn the services. Digital literacy again, okay. And then final question, what should be improved in terms of accessibility and inclusiveness in digital democracy? Feedback and transparency, large band Wi-Fi for free to every citizen. Okay, these are some interesting recommendations already. Digital literacy is always a response to everything. I think digital transformation and digital literacy go hand by hand, it seems. Okay, I will go back to the first questions. Just to see, because we didn't have any contributions back then. Do you regularly use online government public services? Okay, 52% already uses it, which is a promising start. Elisa, what do you have to add on these responses, if you have any? Okay, this is interesting. Do you prefer public administration services to be online or offline? We have 100% preferring online. While in the previous question, if you regularly use it, only 52% uses it, which leads to some questions regarding the accessibility and the design and the easiness of using such tools. Okay, I see a lot of heads nodding here. Okay, here we don't have a lot of changes, so I will move to the next category, Elisa. If you have nothing to add on the responses from the co-creation session, I think we can move to digital economy.
Yeah, sure. I think that the results from the previous session were quite interesting in the sense that I see a lot of trust in technology, although of course it's not perfect, but at least from the Portuguese perspective, there is a lot of trust that there is potential to make things better when they're all online. And it's good to see that e-voting is very welcomed at the European elections, because I know for a fact that there is some movement there around e-elections for the next European elections in a few years. So we'll see if this ever pans out. And it's good to see that there is also a push from the side of the local level as well. So now we can move to digital economy. So while digital democracy was one of the aspects that we touched upon, we also touched upon, of course, the new development of our economy that is based on digital computing. And I will go through a few of the definitions of digital economy that we touched upon, and then the recommendations that came out, some actions for the EU level. So when we talked about digital economy, we were mentioning many different types of aspects of digital economy. For example, the digital industry 4.0. So everything including the Internet of Things, cloud computing, etc. We also spoke about digital finance, so really the impact of these new technologies on financial services. And this includes, of course, not only processes, but also business models, products, etc. Data economy, which is the creation of the single markets for data in the EU, where data can flow across the sectors, of course, so that it can benefit to economic growth. Here, of course, civil society is pushing for the access and use of data that is fair and practical and clear and also respected. Then there's also supporting green digital solutions, of course, for the benefit of the environment. And if you know a lot about, even a bit about cryptocurrencies, this is also a big discussion around the environmentally friendliness of this. Social welfare in the digital age as well, so digital transformation of public welfare services, digital businesses and companies, so how the use of technology is creating new value in business models, customer experiences and internal capabilities. So here we talk about, for example, Uber, Amazon, etc. So here in digital economy, we also see the same challenges, which is mainly about ensuring accessibility to digital economy, and also more specifically at the EU, the creation of a single market for data. Here, some proposed actions that came from our civil society group were around how to make sure that people are not excluded. So to support digitally and socially excluded groups with funds, resources, and digital transition programs. And here we really focus on people that are left behind due to inaccessibility, unavailability, or unaffordability of the technologies. And there is also the fact that maybe they just lack connectivity or digital skills. So the second proposed action at the EU level is to introduce a corporate tax rule so that profits that are registered and tax-based businesses are geographically have significant interaction with users through digital channels. So this was a bit specific. As you will see, some of the recommendations are quite general around the values, but other ones were really pushed by civil society to be more specific in tackling certain problems that we found. Then a third one was, for example, to establish a central pool of advisors that can be requested by smaller companies to advise them on what they can be improved. So there was a big debate here also in the Conference of the Future of Europe around SMEs and how to make sure that SMEs are not disadvantaged on the digital economy and digital market. Then to improve also the market in crypto assets regulation. So here we decided that it is important to establish a single taxonomy while being open to new developments. So here, of course, we were also making these recommendations during the invasion that is happening in Ukraine. And we have seen a lot of movement on how authoritarian regimes also try to circumvent global sanctions via crypto assets. And so we had a big discussion around how that cryptocurrency should be regulated better in the future. They're not regulated basically at the moment, so any step forward would be good. Okay, so this was my contribution, and now we can do the co-creation session around digital economy, and we should have already, yes. Here we just have 4 questions for you. And as you can see, the questions are really, again, from your point of view, what can be improved, for example, in services. The first question is really about digital finance and the impact of new technologies on the financial industry services. Then we have other ones on the how to improve the accessibility of these services. And then we also have the third one, which is if you see these new types of business models and customer experiences such as Uber, Amazon, but many more. I mean, Uber and Amazon are just the ones that are well known. Are they a good thing or are they a bad thing for our economy and our society? And the last one is an open question. Once again, we just want to know your thoughts. All of this is anonymous. So it's any suggestion to make digital economy a bit more inclusive. And of course, it may be a bit technical, but feel free to share any sorts of ideas that you have based on your experience. Okay, back to you, Vasiliki. Maybe you can check again how these are going.
Yes, thank you, Lisa. So we already have some responses for this question. We have 10 responses. There seems to be a majority not believing that digital finance is accessible to everyone, and this is interesting. I am very interested on the contributions actually on the open question, because they can give us insight on how to make this accessible, because there is a clear tendency of people not believing it is accessible, but the question remains, what can we do about it? And then we have actually 3 responses on this. We have, okay, we have someone saying that specifically targeting digital literacy on how to use the app. So the accessibility has actually to do with people being used to the layout of the apps. And this is very interesting because a lot of apps use universal for the main. For example, we have the hamburger for the menu bar, etc. But we do need more universal, I think, layouts throughout several apps to make it easier. Proper documentation. Not everyone is ready to learn how to use these services. Of course, we have to account methodologies for these people too. And then we also have the question on, do you see the use of technology to create a new value in business models, customer experience, and internal capabilities that support its cooperation as a good thing or bad thing? And here we have sometimes good, sometimes bad as the main response, although the mainly good is also quite predominant. We do not have anyone stating that it is mainly bad. And then for this question, we have already 24 responses. And then we have other suggestions. Okay, someone raises the issue for privacy. I think we will touch upon this, Lisa, later on too. But it is indeed an issue that is transversal to all the categories. Digital democracy, digital economy, of course. Oh, someone has a nice idea to introduce digital literacy and methodology in the education system. Okay, provide information and tools to increase the security of using this kind of services, more friendly layouts. Okay. Platforms for 9 to 90 years old persons. Okay, that's interesting. And with the increase of the mean life range, I think that we can go for over 100 at some point. We will need to account for that too. Okay, Elisa, do you have something to add, or we could move to the digital rights?
No, I think that we can leave just a few minutes for people to just brainstorm a bit on their own.
Yeah, sure.
We can, yeah, it's 54 now. Yeah, we can give like 5 minutes.
Okay, so Elisa, let's move to the digital rights and what issues have arisen there.
Yeah, sure. So as you've seen, we've talked about digital democracy and digital economy as in the ways in which citizens can participate. But of course, how can citizens participate? What we have been talking about, and you'll see it in the next 3 subtopics, is around their digital rights, but also their digital freedoms online. So when we talk about this concept, we really mention the secure and sustainable digital infrastructures, the right for everyone to have access to these technological infrastructures. And here there are many different concepts that go along this general umbrella concept. So digital citizenship, for example, is the development of a framework of digital rights and principles that will help promote and uphold EU values in the digital space. Digital services. We want the right to fair, transparent, accountable digital services, content moderation processes. Online privacy as well, of course, the right to privacy that a person has when he or she is connected or they is connected to the internet. E-information, the right to access information that is provided by governments, but not only governments, but also private sector companies, etc. Net neutrality is the right, which is very much debated about actually at the EU level, is the right to the internet access, which would be offered to everyone on a non-discriminatory basis without favoring certain websites, application, or services. When we talk about data, we talk about two different concepts, for example, data protection, but also data retention. So the right to the protection of data and the knowledge about how this data is retained on a certain application or website, etc. Then there is copyright issues. So traditionally, the exclusive and assignable legal rights, which is given to an originator for a fixed number of years to publish, perform, to film, to record literary, artistic, or music material. So this was the original definition of copyright, and in the digital age, this copyright should be implemented in a way that benefits the creators and society. There was also a lot of debate around copyright issues in the past few years at the EU level. Then there's also the online safety of journalists and ensuring the plurality of voices in the media. And the last one, protecting fundamental rights in the online environment. So that was it for the definitions. So let's see what were the main challenges according to civil society on defending rights and freedoms online. Again, ensuring accessibility to the digital infrastructures to the entire population. So it's really about inclusiveness, equality, but then we went a bit more specific on more around corruption and censorship. So to make sure about data protection as well, to make sure about online privacy and net neutrality. And some proposed actions that came out of this was a stronger e-privacy regulation to be adopted immediately by the member states, also reinforcing GDPR nationally. This is quite specific, as you will see, around EU policymaking and how it should be implemented, of course, in the member states. Then a second point was about highly sensitive information. For example, migration status, or even like sexual orientation, race, or economic conditions as well should be protected even better, and restricting this type of access to this information as much as possible, and limiting also the requirement to disclose this information, and ensuring that public decisions are not based in big data and biased algorithms, of course. The third point, or the third action that was proposed, was around net neutrality. So monitor any attempts to introduce practices such as zero rating that undermine net neutrality, and take regulatory action when needed. As you can see, some of them are very specific because they come from organizations such as EDRI or Access Now, that they really fight for these digital rights as civil society. Then we also have around encryption, so ensuring that encryption is protected, and that there are legislations that try to protect this type of encryption. Then there is also the action of building digital infrastructures and ensuring financial sustainability for equipment, and for especially for people that have problems in having this type of equipment, so low income household or the homeless, etc. Another big debate was about facial recognition technologies, and there are certain civil society organizations that have been really fighting to ban mass surveillance and facial recognition technology. And in general, civil society has been in agreement that these can undermine an enabling environment for democratic societies, and they can threaten, let's say, civil and political rights as well. And another specific one was around the copyright directive to allow exemptions for people with disabilities to access ebooks, films, and music, and to reform this directive in order to allow them to do so.
Yes, I think we can move now to the cooperation activity, Elisa.
Yes.
Exactly. So we have several questions. The first being, do you think everyone in the EU should have the right to free, affordable, high-speed internet and access to technological infrastructure? I think in an open question previously, we saw this as a recommendation, but still it is a question that can stand on itself. Do you think your rights are sufficiently protected online? And here we also have the response of, I don't know, and it would be interesting to see the comparison between the ones that can confidently say, give a response, and from the ones that they do not feel comfortable actually even evaluating it. Then we have a question about the personal data and how they are treated whenever we connect online. And this is a question about the action. What do you do if it is unclear how your data are collected? So finally, how should we ensure all citizens know what their rights are when they connect to the internet? Okay, so I will give you some time and then we will go back and see the responses. Oh, okay, someone proposes that we use symbols. Create with citizens and companies the EU Digital Citizen Charter of Principles. Okay. Okay, I will give you a few minutes. You can discuss also about this among you, and we will come back to see the responses. Okay, I think we can move on if everyone agrees. Okay, so we have 90% stating that everyone should get a free, affordable, high-speed internet and access to technological infrastructure. Okay, that's interesting. And 60% believing that they are not sufficiently protected online. Only 3% state that they cannot state if they are protected sufficiently online, and 37% feel that sometimes they are sufficiently protected online, while we have 0% of yes. That's interesting.
That's reality.
That's reality, okay. So 57% states that it is not clear to them how their personal data are treated. 40% states that sometimes it is clear, and 3% they don't know, but yet again 0% states that it's clear to them all the time. Okay, and what do you do if it's unclear? So, some people exit the site and are careful with the information that they provide. Okay. some people do not advance on the website, deny access to personal data as much as possible. Sorry. And avoid sharing some data. So I see there is some pushback on this. Okay. And then how should we ensure citizens know what their rights are? We already discussed, I saw an interesting response about visual identity of rights that are and retention of data. Develop a document for EU citizens' rights online so that the policies are clear, show information more clearly, simple language, no misleading information, clear and simple message about what info they are giving away and how the personal information is managed. Okay, I'm very interested to go into the recommendations in depth and see all the recommendations of this event. Now we have finished the co-creation activity. Elisa, do you have something to comment on the results of the co-creation activity?
Well, I thought it was really interesting that there were some people who did not think that the internet should be a fundamental right. And I would be really curious to know why, of course. So that's the first question. Yeah. Exactly. Maybe Luis, you have an idea? I was curious to see if he has an idea why. Or did anyone have a reason why it shouldn't be a fundamental right for people to have access to the internet? You can also put it in the chat.
Why they believe that. So yeah.
Then the other answers were also, quite. I just wonder, like, how if people think that there is any country in the world where they would feel safe with data protection, because I do think that with the whole GDPR regulation, that in Europe our data is actually better protected than any other continent, most probably in the world. But I think that the GDPR nowadays is quite strict on how data is being treated and everything. But I also feel the same distrust when I use, different websites and I have to put my data. So I completely understand why 58% here, think it's not clear. And there was also a lot of mistrust on how the data is actually used. But in the end of the day, as I said,
Sorry, Elisa, again, they can use the Q&A to state which country they feel that it would be easier for them to protect it, or they can also use the chat in Zoom, because this is not does not need to be anonymous. So
yeah, sure. But yeah, it was interesting to see the results also.
So. Yeah. Is it okay if we move to the next category?
Yes, sure.
Great. Digital safeguards, and the floor is yours, Elisa.
Okay, so here we had a subtopic that was called digital safeguards, because we thought that apart from, rights, it was important also for the EU to put in place certain regulation, legislations to ensure the respect of these values and ethics and norms in the digital space. So that's why we created this subtopic called the digital safeguards. And here we asked the civil society organizations to talk about different concepts. For example, cybersecurity. So it's of course, the protection from hackers, fraud, viruses, etc., and managing the risk that these attacks bring. The second subtopic was also artificial intelligence, which is a big debate also at the EU level. And here our discussions were around how do we ensure an ethical AI that protects people's communities and societies from escalating economic, political, and social issues that can be posed by AI. Linked to AI, of course, around algorithms. So how do you specifically ensure the transparency of these algorithms? But not only that about transparency, but also that these algorithms are not biased, etc. Another thing that we spoke about was around online disinformation and protection against false, inaccurate, misleading information that can cause harm to people. And usually this harm is to make a profit out of it, or, you know, for political reasons, etc. So another 4 concepts that we were talking about were around audiovisual media services, which is a regulation of online content and the role of online platforms for disseminating these media outputs, and the direct impact that this content has on freedom of expression and access to information. Then we also talked about integrity of elections. So how to ensure that there is integrity and the protection of the integrity of elections, and how do we use it to promote also democratic participation. 7th concept was around online hate speech, of course. How do we make sure that there are rules and procedures on how to prevent practices of hate speech that denigrates people based on their race, ethnicity, gender, social status. And linked to this also more extremely about illegal content online and how to ensure measures can tackle this illegal content online. So these were the things that we discussed about. And once again, we came up with what were, according to us, the challenges and what were the proposed actions to the EU. So the challenges are ensuring cybersecurity all the time, ensuring an ethical use of AI, ensuring the transparency of algorithms, monitoring the online disinformation. How do you do that? Ensuring accessibility, once again, and monitoring online hate speech and what to do about it as well. So when we thought about these challenges, we thought about also recommendations and solutions. So first of all, around artificial intelligence, we came up with a big discussion on how to actually frame it, because there are some times that we need artificial intelligence, and sometimes we need it to be more, more, let's say, based on human also verification and control. So we proposed to the EU to actually develop a framework that determines the extent, type, and form and moment of human intervention in an AI automated system. In this framework, one of the determining criteria should be the AI's impact on rights, duties, and liberty. So we had this discussion because in the beginning, civil society organizations kind of agreed that there should always be a human intervention. There should always be some sort of human verification of the content instead of just giving it to AI. But we also recognize that there are certain examples in which we can only, we use AI to avoid certain things that happen. For example, one thing that was mentioned was Facebook and the elimination of very, very extreme terrorist content on Facebook, which is done automatically by AI. And there is research showing that if this was to be done by a human intervention, these people would, for example, be more prone to depression and to mentally and psychologically feel very bad. So this is one of the examples in which we can use AI mainly to eliminate immediately the online hate content and to make sure that no human actually
Elisa,
needs to
we
see
have
that
lost you for a minute. Give us 1 moment.
Yeah. Okay. So another topic that we had around AI was the AI, artificial intelligence, used for military purposes and for weapons. While we had a discussion on banning completely artificial intelligence used for military purposes, we also thought that maybe banning is not completely the way forward, but there should be certainly some ways to regulate AI system, including those that fall under the remit of the common foreign and security policy. So, for example, those based on military purposes. Another thing is around to provide support technically, financially, on the policy level for civil society organizations that are helping to counter online hate speech and to protect survivors, and also to conduct independent media. So it is important to really have these civil society organizations that can help to ensure that everything is in order. For example, that there's more digital literacy education, including education on cybersecurity and of artificial intelligence to citizens. The fourth call for action was around fundamental freedoms and to deter illegal hate speech, including online content moderation. That's also a big debate. Online content moderation, according to civil society, should always require some sort of human review and accessible and clear criteria, which is agreed amongst different parts of society on how to remove or restrict certain content. And this is something which is being worked on in the Digital Service Act. And something that civil society is fighting for here in Brussels is also more specific safeguards in the Digital Service Act. And then the last one is about the member states that should immediately transpose and implement the Audiovisual Media Service Directive. This one's a bit technical, but if you're interested in it, of course, you can always check it afterwards. So I think these were the main proposed actions that came out from our report. And now we can do the co-creation session so that we can see also what you think about digital safeguards and rules and procedures that should be implemented at the EU level.
So let's move to the digital, to the co-creation session for digital safeguards. Once again, I will go through the questions real fast, and then you will have some time to discuss about them and think about them. You will have all the time you need to submit your responses. So how can we ensure AI and algorithms do not lead to discrimination? Are there specific safeguards that policymakers should implement, especially to protect vulnerable groups? What are vulnerable groups in our digital society, and what are their vulnerabilities? Specify which group has which vulnerability. These are only 4 questions, but they are all open questions. So maybe it would help if you took some time to think about it or discuss about it among you. So I will give you 5 minutes and then we will come back.
Yeah, I would just like to clarify a bit the so we're looking here to know also from you which ones do you think are the most vulnerable groups when we talk about digital transformation. So if it's like, for example, people that are elderly with the seniors, the last question is, what do you think are what are their vulnerabilities? So specify if the group is seniors, then they're vulnerable because they have, for example, a lack of understanding, or if it's about disability, then it's really the lack of access. So that's why you can specify in the last 2 questions, which ones do you think? If it's a homeless person or a migrant, it's more about an access. For example, it's again, access to infrastructures or affordability, etc. So just think about Lisbon and think about Portugal and the situation that is in your country, of course.
Okay, for the first question, we already have a response about how to ensure AI and algorithms do not lead to discrimination. And it is interesting that the response says part of them must be transparent and that we need committees controlling the transformation. Okay, this is very interesting. Which parts? This raises the questions: which parts would be transparent, and why parts, or how does this help with the discrimination? And then we have responses to check and bias data sets, and also improve algorithm skills. So with the technology, the experts must follow in terms of skills and understanding. Okay. And we also have a response for the second question regarding the specific safeguards that would help protect vulnerable groups. So we have, again, there is a recommendation for advocacy committees with a specific focus on the vulnerable groups and how to include them. Okay, this is interesting because we have a difficulty that is stated. It is difficult to implement policies when on the other side, the big companies follow their own rules. Okay, so this has to do with the implementation of policies. And Elisa, I don't know if you have a comment on this, but how is this making sure that the companies actually follow the rules, and what mechanism for accountability are there? And then we have responses on how policymakers and how they should protect everyone as equal without labeling groups and people. And again, we have someone saying it is very difficult. So apart from the recommendations, we also get some responses saying stating the difficulty of this operation. Compliance tools, okay, that's interesting. I will move on. Here we have 8 responses regarding the vulnerable groups, old people in general, people that live in poor areas outside cities, homeless and all areas with difficult internet access, elderly persons, gypsies, poor people living in informal areas with reduced electricity, persons with low scholarization, non-digital natives, and elderly, and the youngest. That's interesting. And people with less education. Seniors are very, very stated again and again in this response. Again, we have young ages too, and people who aren't able to use the technology properly, people with disabilities. Okay. We have AIDS, education, no access to internet and computer or mobile phones. Okay, now this explains the young ages that we saw before as vulnerable groups, saying that young ages make naive decisions. So they still need digital literacy, but maybe not on how to use the layout of the app, but more about what decisions to make with it. And the elderly, it is stated that they have wrong ideas and use cases when it comes to the internet. Okay. Not having access is a vulnerability on itself, of course. Again, so if I understand correctly, all the age range is vulnerable in one way or another. Here we see web frauds and schemes as an example of vulnerability. We already have 11 responses. I will give 2 more minutes. And I have a question, a very interesting question, Elisa, at the Q&A, about who knows enough about AI to answer? And this is about our co-creation activity, I suppose, and the fact that a lot of people are not well equipped to respond to these issues. But I think this is part of the issue that is raised in this co-creation activity. I mean, we as citizens, some experts, some not, but interested in digital transformation, are ill-equipped to even state what would be our preference or what would ensure our rights, inclusive processes, etc. So I think even this question on itself states exactly the issue that we need to focus on. And it will fit in very well with our next category, digital education. So Elisa, if you have no comments.
Yeah, on the who knows enough about AI to answer, I'm not really sure if this was a general question or linked to what we did with the convention group. But in general, I think that AI is technically very complicated, of course, and not many people understand. But that's actually part of the problem, that the fact that we don't understand means that there's also a lack of transparency around the process of AI itself. And that was something I was mentioning also with algorithms. The fact that we don't sometimes understand how things are categorized in an automated way is a problem. And I can give you an example of the Conference on the Future of Europe. They opened a multilingual platform for citizens to contribute with their policy ideas on this platform. And in the final report, they have written that the categorization of the ideas and how this report was done was based on both manual examination of the results of the multilingual platform, but also based on automated decision-making processes. So meaning a certain algorithm or AI was behind it also to come up with the conclusions of this report for the Conference on the Future of Europe. The problem with this, according to my expertise and knowledge, is the fact that the process was not transparent since the beginning, meaning that citizens have no clue on how the AI was first developed and how this, if it's not AI, it's maybe just an algorithm, was actually doing the categorization of the results. And I really think that already like resolving the problem of transparency is a way forward for people to understand better how an AI is developed, who developed. I think the questions is how it was developed, who developed the AI, and what is the process of the AI to come out with a certain result, and afterwards to know if there is any sort of human intervention that will also, let's say, manipulate that result in a certain way to come out with the final outcome. So already, who understands enough about AI should be the question, and the answer should be all around also transparency of certain processes that are there.
Thank you, Elisa. That was a very thorough response. If we're ready, we can move to the final category, digital education. So, Elisa, the floor is yours.
Sure. So as you can see, the last subcategory that we have is around digital education, which you obviously know is maybe the basis of all of this. And that's why we're ending with this one. And it's about resetting education and training in the digital age. So here, the concepts that we really spoke about were around digital competences, which is more about the basic set of digital skills that we should have, covering like data literacy, information literacy, online communication, online collaboration, digital content creation, and safety and problem solving. These are competences, so around the literacy part. Well, when we talk about digital skills, we're more talking about job-related skills. So really like, or digital skills for ICT professionals, so more in the practical sense of the term. In digital learning, we were talking about more about the use of these digital tools and technologies for teaching purposes, but also for learning purposes. Media literacy, obviously the skills that allow people to assess in a critical way what they received online, how the media is shaped, how information is created and developed and is put online, which is very important. And then the fifth one, we just named it awareness raising, which is more about informing and communicating to citizens about what digital practices are and how they're implemented. So here we had a few proposed actions as well. But first, let's looking at the challenges. Once again, the horizontal one is really about ensuring accessibility. And here, of course, ensuring digital literacy for all, and also data protection, which is linked, of course, to the other subtopics that we talked about. The proposed actions, first of all, developing training and EU programs on a wide range of digital skills. And here it's very interesting because we had a discussion about the difference between technical skills, so really understanding how to use digital tools, but also ethics and soft skills. So really other types of questions, not only about the practical, but also around the ethics of the digital and other types of skills people should have. And these are especially needed for citizens in vulnerable positions, including low-skilled adults, low-income households, disabilities, refugees, people facing social exclusion, etc., etc. So we came up really with a long list of who are vulnerable people according to us. Then another way to move forward is also to have more EU-funded programs for civil society. Once again, they're the mediators between citizens and policymakers and governments on developing educational strategies, digital educational strategies for these for citizens. A third action we proposed was to consult informal education trainers when developing digital education plans, both at the European and national levels. So sometimes we have the feeling that when regulations, legislations are created at the EU level, not all stakeholders in society are taken into account. And it would be very important to always have the education trainers in the discussions when they're trying to come up with a digital education plan. And the last one is to train teachers much more, and also to train public administration much more around the essentials of digital technologies, softwares, algorithms, and to foster a better understanding, a better discussion of all of this knowledge and how to transmit this knowledge then to both students, but also to civil servants and anyone else that can help to continue passing on this knowledge in the future. So that's it, I think, for the proposed actions. And now we can start with the last co-creation session and almost the end of this, workshop.
Exactly. So again, I will go through the questions and then I will give some time for everyone to discuss, think about it, and submit the response.
This one's for Portugal, not Ireland. We just wrote it, but.
Sorry.
Obviously, the question is for initiatives in Portugal.
Yes. Apologies for that typo. Okay. Are digital education initiatives in Portugal easy to find and accessible for all vulnerable groups, old people, minorities, etc.? And then, are you aware of any classes, informal workshops given on digital education? This is for lifelong learning, not for school necessarily. Like it's informal, so we're trying to see if adults can reskill themselves. Are there enough opportunities for individuals or communities to attain a digital education after formal education? Who could support in giving free digital education to citizens? Oh, we already have a response, and it is public institutions. Okay, let's see how this ends up by the end of the activity. If you have any questions on a particular app or platform, who would you ask for help? Okay, other, not a friend, not a family, not an NGO, not a public institution, not a private company, other. I would be very interested to see what this other is. If someone wants to let us know through the Q&A or through the chat, that would be great. Thank you. And then, who do you think needs digital education the most? And we have a response, elderly people. So I will give you 5 full minutes to think about it. We have 2 responses, elderly people, in this poll. Okay, and then we will go through the results. And then we have also another question. What are your suggestions for ensuring every citizen has digital education and skills to navigate our digitalized society? Here we have very interesting contributions. A real program, 100% digital education. Okay. Digital citizenship in schools, publicly available workshop courses. Okay, I think I'm going to start from the beginning, and I will start reviewing the responses. In the initial questions, we already have 20 and more responses. So I'm moving on. Again, here we have 27 responses, and most of the people are not aware of any classes or informal workshops on digital education. But we do have 37% who are aware of such projects, which is good. And then regarding the opportunities for someone to attain a digital education after formal education, I think they might be few, since 22% say there are enough, but 57% states that they're not enough. And 21% now states that they do not know. So this is also interesting. Who could support in giving free digital education? Most of the responses state public institutions. Okay. And we have 0% other. So this should be like mainly public institutions' responsibility, with NGOs and private companies contributing to the cost, according to the results we're seeing here. And then if you have any questions, who do you ask? Most of the people ask a friend. 29% ask someone other. I would really like to know who is this other. So
YouTube.
Alexa. Alexa, okay. Okay, so then if you responded other and you want, you can share who is that other, on the Q&A or through the comments. And then we have some using asking family members, a public institution, a private company, and very few ask for an NGO. I cannot see the percentage, but it's lower than 4. So yeah. And who do you think needs digital education the most? I think elderly people prevail here. I mean, I think it's clear. And here, what are the suggestions for ensuring every citizen has digital education? We have a very heartbreaking comment. So realistic is an utopia to assume that every citizen will have digital education. First, the world is asymmetric. If in the EU, internet and digital are familiar, and even though not embraced by everyone, in other realities, it's impossible to imagine a digital society. Nevertheless, in the near future, with an education focus in IT, but not as a message, okay, that's interesting, and with the human in the core of it, we can achieve a high percentage of educated people in digital. But yeah, okay, this is very interesting because it actually asks for an intersectional addition of digital education in the curriculum, in the educational curriculum, and the tools, the ICT tools, to be used as the means for knowledge in. I think we come back to the public administrations, the NGOs. I think we need to break down who is that someone who will teach for free, and how are they gaining a fair salary, because fair payments should also be part of it. So maybe how you can facilitate this process through funding, budgetary provisions, etc. And again, integrate digital education methods in school, national program to promote digital competencies and digital inclusion. And I cannot see below, so I will have to go through all the contributions, and we will share a report, of course, with the contributions and what the Portuguese stakeholders shared with us today. I think we have a lot of content to work on, and the EU has a lot of content to start designing new policies upon. Lisa, what do you think?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone for the contributions. Maybe we did not mention it, but we are actually going in different countries across Europe to really bring these questions to the local level. So we started in Ireland, and now we're in Portugal. And for this year, we're going to Estonia, Luxembourg, and also to Latvia as well, and another 5 countries, I think, next year. So the idea is that every time we're also going to do a comparative analysis of these responses, and to try to come up with a final report that will be all around guidelines for digital inclusion at the EU level, that we will then bring to policymakers here in Brussels to explain to them what also local citizens and member states have been thinking about when thinking about inclusion. And I think that it's very interesting to see also the difference between the countries, and we will look forward to also working on the comparative analysis so that we can bring it back to you. And I'm sure Luis will share with you the reports in the end, so that you can also see what differences the countries have amongst themselves, and also related to, for example, the perception of the digital transformation that is happening, and especially the trust that we have in data protection, privacy, and what types of regulation we think should be brought up there, and how we can solve also the digital divide that exists. So thanks a lot really for your contributions, to them for attending this event. And thanks again to Luis, to Amanda, to OneSource, all the team for helping us organize this event where you are in Portugal. And we're really working together with the ECAS members to try to, and other civil society organizations, so that we can have a collaborative effort in this as well.
And thanks. A final question?
Yes, sure.
We conclude. So this was quite interesting. We had here around an average of 38% attending remotely, and around 15 in person. And I have a question. So we have here two complete different participations, and we used here the tool, the Slido, to engage. And most of the people here are used to or frequently participate on discussions, on workshops and seminars where there's physical to physical debate. And my question for the audience at home, but also here, is what is the difference from having this Slido tool to have this discussion compared to have in-person discussions like we can do in person? So my first comment is yes, we do have nice results in the board, and I saw very good comments. And I even saw, I myself did the same, which was when I saw something written, I went back and changed so to add more to it. But then I have another question, or I have my question, which is, if we did a discussion here with everyone in a round table, would the discussion improve of quality or not? Because many times during this presentation and this work, I had a comment, I had a question, I had something to say, but I was a little bit apprehensive. And again, I'm used to this type of tools. I'm used to work on this. What is the impact of these changes when the public is not so digitally intuitive? So, Giovanni.
Okay. I'm not very digital intuitive, but now for me, the issue is that this type of work requires a further work in the end to refine redundancies that happen frequently when you are all contributing at the same time. So you're saying the same thing several times. So what I miss is not a bad process. It's low quality in terms of deliberation because we don't have the opportunity to refine together and to echo things, to reverberation, how to when you discuss, first of all, there is this aspect here. Emotion. Everything is just opposite, and we try to find a synthesis when we are together. So we miss the possibility of disagreement and then deal with the disagreement, interpreting it, explaining it. Everything is not explained. When we do we use a wrong word, we cannot express what we wanted to say. Nobody else can tell us the better word to use in this case. So there is a little bit less refinement because we miss the resonance that happens when you are talking and then you send the request. Here we all send the request and then we think about it. And normally we say something and we elaborate collectively one intense, dense phrase, sentence that we give to you. So also for you, the result is less impacting because you have to interpret it.
Well, I would agree. I would agree, and that's why. So digital transformation is everywhere. Is in events, in policy co-creation is everywhere. And now what we're trying to do is have the best of both. That's why we said, okay, you can discuss. And I was saying it in every co-creation activity. In some cases, there was I got something about cookies, but it was in Portuguese and I could not really understand.
But the setting, for example, this is not the right place for discussing because we are far, we are giving the back to the others. So, I mean, maybe around the table we could really discuss, but in 30 seconds, 40 seconds.
Yeah, but the initial idea was to have an offline event. Unfortunately, it has always been in the project proposal that we wrote to go around to different countries was to have an offline event. And our idea was in the beginning to get people in like a World Cafe kind of situation to make the event longer. But unfortunately, this whole COVID situation is still there. And it's undeniable that it has been a challenge to actually balance offline events with online. And sometimes when it's online, it's very difficult to have thorough deliberations because people are also very tired of being in front of a screen. It's completely different. And I completely agree that I also feel that before COVID, when we were having these sorts of events offline and we could have the whole day and we will be all together in a room, of course, there was much more discussion. And as you said, sometimes solutions come out through different debates, arguments, pros and cons and compromises that comes. That's what actually, you know, having a democratic discussion is all about. And I completely agree that this online situation also lacks that perspective. Yeah. But in order to be as inclusive as possible, coming back to the theme, we did decide in the very last moment to accept the hybrid situation so that, you know, we could have so many people also joining online from different parts of the country, and to make sure that we could also hear what they had to say based on their daily experiences. So we hope that in some ways, you know, this was
Elisa, my comment was not a critic, it was more to question, because we have here in yeah, sure, if you want to come closer.
Yes.
Sorry for that.
But as Giovanni was saying, and pretty well, there are good things in one and good things in other. I use the two situations already. I use Slido a lot. Slido has a question that avoids people to do monologues in the room. So it ensures that everybody participates. There are not that guy that raises up, do his monologue, and nobody else speaks again because the time will run over.
A bit onanistic.
Yeah. And but also Slido allow the shy people also to have a say, because normally those people would never stand up, would never speak, and with Slido they have that opportunity. I think now there is the question that when you write, you don't have the tone, you didn't have the intuition, you have to interpret. And I can say the same thing 3 times, write the same thing 3 times and meaning 3 different things. And when I speak, you know what I mean, and if you don't understand your question back, that will not happen there. That is the main question of having the 2 realities. But I know with this agenda and in this frame time, if we all use the word, we will be here until tomorrow. I think we will have to get together dinner and finish the subject. Okay, that's it.
Thank you. Yeah, that's exactly where I wanted to reach. So we have here in the public, and Tom, I know a lot of the persons that are attending, and many of you are involved in applying digital tools to citizen engagement, or either participatory budgeting or questionnaires or public consultations or things like that. And we have here quite a generic group that I see. And for example, Cascais, you work a lot, for example, in the PB process in person. Then we have cases where we have, for example, the Martin Muniz, where it was also kind of in person. It was in the start of 100% online. Not because you wanted. It was COVID related, yeah. But the thing is that why did processes start moving to online, and why some of them still use in-person activities, and how is this relation, and how they can cohabitate in a healthy way. So again, in person, it's always an issue. There's people like Giovanni who likes to talk and spends it's only 5 minutes and he speaks for 30 minutes, right?
In the good days, it's 2 hours.
Yeah, exactly. But then we have the shy people who do not like to interject, who are afraid of expressing themselves, and how can they cohabitate? Because it's and what I see is that it's really difficult to define one model or one channel, as I presented before, or one solution to one engagement process. And that's exactly what I was trying to question here, because for sure it's something that we all spend our days most of the time thinking about.
Yeah, I think, Luis, if I may, I think that it's all about your objective in the end of the day. What was the objective of this event was also some sort of, like, in our project proposal, we had put awareness raising. So our point was also to reach out to as many people who was interested in this topic as possible. And the reason why we also had questions which were pretty open and easy and accessible for people was because the main point was to showcase what we were doing at the EU level, together with like more EU-based civil society organizations. So on the one hand, really to raise awareness about the whole process we went through, and on the other hand, to have more contributions. So I think that the answer to your question is simply, what is the objective of the event itself sometimes? Because maybe sometimes you just need to be in the same room and have like 2 days of brainstorming together to get the results that you want. And in the end, our objective was also to just simply tell, you know, other civil society organizations in different countries about what we've been doing at the EU level to get their feedback on this.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I wanted to go. It's do people who are deciding about processes think about the objective of what they are doing, or just build whatever and not thinking about exactly that? If what they are doing is going to exclude, if it's going to be inclusive, and if it will fit the goals of what they are doing or not. So that was exactly where I wanted to go. Okay, any more questions or comments? We have already passed the time, but no? Okay, Elisa, I think that we are at the end. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you for making this happen. And we're very happy to also bring sometimes, you know, the EU level to and hear more about what is happening at the local level, since ICAS is really an EU civil society based here in Brussels. And sometimes we want to check reality with what is happening also at the national and local level, as with today.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think we can close.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.